We're continuing monitoring this a press conference, a virtual one, Governor Gavin Newsom of California, where they are reimposing restrictions for at least the next 3 weeks in so-called hot zones where hospital capacity has gotten very, very low. It's a new metric used to justify curbing, those crowding in public areas and the rest. They're pretty sweeping measures. So if a lot of Californians already upset with the strong arm of a very intrusive government, that's how many critics see this. Others see the governor simply trying to protect his folks. Of course, that will likely be added to this here. But the crackdown there, while not a lockdown, will have rolling sort of restrictions here that will no doubt roil the state, and at least for the next 3 weeks to come. A fellow who knows this process quite well, the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, who, among other things, added his state itself to a travel warning list. Governor DeWine, very good to have you. What is
Neil,
this
thank you.
travel restriction advice you're giving right now?
Well, what we have always done is put a map up every Wednesday for the people of Ohio and put the positivity rates of states across the country. And 15% positivity is very high. And that's a warning. And so what we had to do today to be consistent and honest is to say Ohio is at 15% now. And so we want people, it's just one more caution. It's always been just a light that goes on. It says, hey, if you're going to this state, be careful because they've got a very high spread of the infection. Well, now we have a very high spread of the infection, and we have to tell our own citizens that.
It doesn't go down well. It doesn't even go down well with members of your own party, Governor, several of whom have gathered to try to impeach you, saying you're going too far with these orders. What's going on?
Well, there's 4 members of the General Assembly. There's 132 members of the General Assembly, and 4 of them think that I should be impeached. So they have every right to think that. But I'm going on about my business and, focused on what we have to get done, both with COVID related, but also, frankly, in the other things. We have a budget coming up and, a lot of discussions. The state legislature is in a lame duck session now, and I'm working with Senator Obhoff and Speaker Cupp and the 2 leaders, and, we're working things through.
All of this occurs in a fractious political environment, as I'm sure you're aware, Governor. Well, you had said not too long ago that the president was certainly well within his right to get the count right and make sure it was right. That as you saw things back last time we chatted, it looked like Joe Biden was going to emerge as the President of the United States on January 20th of next year. Do you still subscribe to that?
Yeah, both. Look, I just listened to your account. I think it's great anytime, and no one should be fearful of the President of the United States or anyone going into court and putting forth evidence. He has every right to do that. Our courts are great finders of fact, and the courts are open, and people have absolutely every right to use them, including the President of the United States. I also said that, it certainly, and this was a while ago, it certainly appeared that Joe Biden was going to be the next president. But look, I've had a very great relationship with President Trump. I was talking to him last night about an Ohio-related matter that didn't have anything to do with COVID. And whenever I've asked him, I've called him. He has been there, done everything that he could to help us through this virus. I think that the good news, when I talked to the people of Ohio, we did a press conference today, and we talked about what's the good news. Well, the good news is this vaccine is coming. And
well, did the conversation ever veer into Governor? All right, but when you were talking to him last night, he had suggested maybe primarying you because of your comments that it looked like Joe Biden was going to be the next president. Did that ever come up?
We didn't get into that. We talked about a challenge that we had in Ohio, something that I wanted their help on, and the president said he would see what he could do, and he always does that. So look, it's important to have that relationship, and I was proud to be his chairman in Ohio, and we won by about 8 points.
All right, yeah, you're not too shabby there. So let me ask you a little then on this same issue, if you don't mind, sir. Bill Barr had much similar things to say about this whole issue of fraudulence and ring elections, and has no doubt that maybe some of that was going on. But again, to your point, not to the degree that would have changed the outcome. Apparently, the president, from all reports, bristled at that. There was even some talk that he might still consider getting rid of the attorney general. What do you think of that? Do you think that would be advisable for the president to fire his attorney general?
Well, I remember something President Bush once said when I was in front of him, and he had a member of his staff that was doing something and talking about something, and someone else, a member of Congress, I don't know, he just, the president said, you need to stay in your lane. So my lane is to focus on Ohio and to focus on this virus. And, I don't know the facts that you're recounting, and I've been focused the last few days on the getting the vaccine. And what I was about to say a minute ago was that, this is a major accomplishment of the Trump administration, and it's coming. And it's coming, we think, around December 15th, and we're going to be putting shots in people's arms in Ohio, we hope, the next day. Yeah. So we're excited about it, and I think it's a major accomplishment of the administration.
Governor, before I leave you, we're going to be going live to this Nevada hearing where this is really an opportunity for the Trump campaign to outline exactly the abuses that it sees that cost it not only in that state, that cost the president a win in that state, but in some of these other battleground states. Now, some have said that this battle will be only resolved when the Electoral College meets in less than 2 weeks. The president has indicated that if that's the point at which Joe Biden wins, whatever his grievances, he will accept that. But others aren't so sure. Do you think that when the Electoral College gathers and confirms and certifies that Joe Biden has won, that it's over, that the president should be gracious, that he should attend the inauguration? What?
Sure, but look, that's what the president said. You just quoted the president as saying that that's what he would do. I take him at his word that he will do that.
Well, he didn't say he would go to the inauguration or that he would go down happily about it. He would just say that that's the point.
Well, look, we have a great tradition. We have a great tradition in this country for 200 years, and people accept the result. The president has every right to go into court, but ultimately, when the result is there, the loser always accepts it, and we move on. Doesn't mean we like it, but it's accepted because that's part of who we are. That's what makes us different than a lot of places on earth.
All right, fair enough. Governor DeWine, always classy, always a gentleman.